All right, let's dive in. Today we're talking about a group of poets from the trenches of World War I. Now these guys didn't just write about the war. No, they completely changed how we see it. And they did it by using the very rules of poetry as a weapon to expose a terrible, terrible truth.
For centuries, this was the go-to idea about war. You know, this noble, almost golden ideal. It comes from the ancient Roman poet Horace, and it's all about how glorious it is to sacrifice yourself for your country. This was, for a long, long time, what patriotism was all about.
But then came World War I. The soldiers in those trenches, facing a kind of industrial-scale slaughter the world had never seen. Well, they called that noble idea what it really was: a lie. So how exactly did they use their art, their poetry, to just completely shatter that myth? Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start with this poetic revolution, this lie of glorious war. We really need to understand the huge shift that happened here, from these romantic ideas to just brutal, unflinching reality.
See, before World War I, you had poets like Rupert Brooke who kind of romanticized war, writing from a safe, patriotic distance. But then you have the guys who were actually in the trenches, the ones who survived it, men like Siegfried Sassoon and Wilfred Owen. And they had a very different story to tell. Their poetry wasn't about some abstract idea of glory. No, it was about the mud, the poison gas, the real agonizing personal suffering of a single soldier.
And this brings us to a new mission for art: poetry as a witness. See, poets like Owen and Sassoon, they completely changed the job description for a poet. It wasn't about celebrating a nation's power anymore. It was about testifying, about bearing witness to what was really happening to people.
And this new style, well, it became known as modern war poetry. The focus just completely flipped, It went from the big, epic story of a nation's glory to the tiny, awful story of one soldier's suffering. The whole point was what you might call verisimilitude, basically showing the authentic, brutal, you can't deny it truth of what was going on.
And Wilfred Owen himself summed it up perfectly. This line from the preface to his poems basically became the new mission statement for this entire movement. This was a huge shift. The key thing to get here is that the poetry wasn't powerful because it glorified war. It was powerful because it made you feel profound human pity.
So, the big question is, how did they do it? This is where it gets really, really interesting. This is the central tension. They took the ugliness of war and trapped it inside the beautiful cage of poetry.
I mean, their secret weapon was just genius. It was all about dissonance. Think about it. On one side, you have the content, the ugly truth. We're talking mud, disease, poison gas, trauma, just unflinching death. But on the other side, you have the form, the beautiful cage. We're talking perfect sonnets, iambic rhythm, neat rhymes, ordered stanzas. When you smash those two things together, you get this jarring, unforgettable clash.
Right, so the neatness of the poetic form is constantly clashing with the sheer messiness of what's being described. And that tension, that's the whole key to its power. It's like they're forcing the very proper, polite literary world to look at something absolutely obscene, but they're doing it using poetry's own sacred rules. It makes the truth impossible to ignore. You just can't look away.
Okay, let's break this down with a real example. We're going to do an anatomy of a nightmare here, looking at probably Wilfred Owen's most famous poem, Dulce et decorum est. It is an absolute masterclass in this technique, and it's a direct assault on that old lie we started with.
Listen to how it starts, bent double, like old beggars under sacks. Knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we curse through sludge. Right away, boom, any idea of heroic grandeur is just gone. These aren't proud warriors. Owen paints them as broken, sick old beggars and hags. The glory is dead before the first stanza is even finished. And then, suddenly, there's the panic of a gas attack. Total chaos erupts. But what's so incredible is how Owen describes it. He's using this very controlled, almost musical iambic rhythm to talk about complete pandemonium. And that contrast, it's just terrifying.
Gas, gas, quick boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. You could feel the sensory overload, right? The frantic action, the pure terror. But the poem's structure, the meter, the rhyme scheme, it never completely breaks. It's like it's holding this absolute horror in a tight, vice-like grip, which somehow makes it feel even more suffocating.
And then you get this horrifying climax as under a green sea I saw him drowning. A man dies, right? But he doesn't get a hero's death. He drowns in poison gas, in this green sea of chlorine. So dying for your country is suddenly not about glory at all. It's about the pathetic, awful, suffocating agony of drowning in your own lungs.
So this leads to a really modern question. Can an AI feel pity? Is this incredible skill, this ability to create tension between beautiful form and ugly content to make us feel pity, is that a uniquely human thing? Well, a fascinating modern experiment decided to find out.
Okay, so here's what they did. A language model, an AI, was given a prompt. Write a poem about the 1971 Indo-Pak War, but do it in the style of Wilfred Owen. The whole point was to see if a machine could replicate not just the topics, but the actual artistic genius of these poets, just applied to a different war.
And what happened? Well, the AI did a surprisingly good job of mimicking the content. It nailed the graphic imagery, the disillusioned tone, even the way Owen directly challenges the reader. But, and this is a huge but, it totally missed the most crucial part. The form was just too perfect. It didn't have those subtle, stumbling rhythms or those near rhymes, what critics call pararhyme, that Owen used to make the poem sound so unsettling.
So when it comes down to it, the AI replicated the message, but it couldn't replicate the soul of the art. It couldn't create that jarring human manipulation of form. It understood what to say, but it had no idea how to say it with that uniquely human artistic dissonance. It copied the horror, but it couldn't create the pity. So, what's the big takeaway here? What's the enduring legacy of all this? Well, it's about the courage to speak the truth, and it goes way beyond just literature. It's really about the power of art itself.
I mean, look at what they left us. They proved that form isn't just some fancy decoration. It could be a powerful moral tool. Their work is this vital historical testimony against all the clean, sanitized stories of war. They literally gave us a new language to talk about war, one based not on glory, but on futility and pity. And maybe most importantly, they showed that sometimes the greatest courage in a war isn't fighting, but having the courage to speak the truth about it.
And this leaves us with a pretty provocative question, doesn't it? These poets, they dedicated their art, and for many of them their lives, to exposing the old lie of their generation. So it kind of makes you stop and think, what's the old lie of our time?
And those final lines from Owen's poem, they aren't just an ending. They're a direct, timeless warning. He says if you'd seen what he'd seen, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory, the old lie, dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. It's a warning against sending young people to die for a beautiful lie. And you have to admit that warning feels just as powerful and just as necessary today as it did over 100 years ago.